Well, it's that time. A new release just came out and the devs have opened the gates to have a bit of community discussion and talk about what they've recently released. Now, normally this happens on Reddit, but this time, for a start to guide us, the devs are doing it over on their official forums. And a lot of people are suggesting this might have been because of the controversy that came out at the back of the last AMA, of course, where one of their developers then went and had a rant on Twitter, and it led to multiple firings and blah, blah, blah. So, I don't know, I think that the devs wanted to be a little bit more controlled about it this time. We'll see what kind of responses they've offered now. I'm doing this video quite early after the whole thing began, which might mean I miss some developer responses if they're particularly late to the game and responding over this weekend, next weekend. You might find that that's not there, but I'll try and fill you in on the upcoming videos anyway. So you get the opening thread here from Gail Gray. She says, hello and welcome to the September 2018 ArenaNet forum chat. We're happy to have host this conversation and look forward to hearing from you. Today's topic is primarily focused on the game updates of Tuesday, September 18th, which is Living World Season 4, Episode 4, the Mithrite Gambit, the Legendary Scepter, the Sun's Refuge, and the Jahai Bluffs maps. Funnily enough, I don't think there was a single question about the Scepter, unfortunately, that was thrown there. People really don't seem to talk about the legendary aspects of the patches now as much as they did in previous ones. It's still a pretty cool legendary, though. But so the guests are, you can see the list here, I won't read them all out. Many names you should recognize, a couple you may not. A few guidelines, people weren't meant to post more than 3 questions in a single thread, blah, 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 blah. Let's get on with it. There's going to be a real range of questions here, including some lore, some story stuff, but also just general things about the release, starting off mostly with raid stuff. So, somebody asks here about Wing 6 achievements. Okay, this is not directly an Episode 4 question, but it came with the patch, so I'll ask, why did you reduce the AP for Wing 6 compared so much to previous ones? So, Wing 1 had 91, Wing 2 had 107, Wing 3 was consistent with 107, Wing 4 went all the way up to 155, but don't forget they had all that cool post-exploration stuff that got added on the end there. Wing 5, the Hall of Chains for this expansion was down to 115, but still more than all the old ones. And Wing 6 plummeted to just 79 AP. So they're wondering why. I guess people care about the AP acquisition if you are a raider and also an AP racer. And it does seem a bit weird. Well, the developer response is very simple. It's from Anthony, who says, this was a bit of an oversight on our end. We'll likely look to normalize the AP values in a future patch. Which is curious. So not only does that suggest they'll eventually settle onto a specific number, perhaps as we can see here, the 107 is the best one to go for. It might also mean, though, that they will go back and make all of the old ones worth more and less until everything's at 107. So, hey, seems like a really arbitrary small thing to me. Does it really matter if they're not consistent? But, hey. Next, we got a question still about the raid, talking about dialogue. This is the kind of question that always makes me a bit sad, but I totally understand. From Dynasty Royal. In this patch, you can now skip Samurog's cutscene, which helps a lot for people who want to move from one boss to the next. That unskippable cutscene was very annoying, for what it's worth. Unfortunately, the long RP talks between Zomoros, the players, and the scripts detracts from the action quite a bit and leads to rather long waiting periods. This is especially bad after Boss 1 while waiting for the Jackal portals to open. Prior raids always made dialogue and cutscenes optional. What are the feelings surrounding this decision to make this waiting period upwards of 3 minutes? Are there any plans to make the RP optional or less intrusive to a group who rather do the content? I loathe that perspective. Oh, it's not content if it... But I mean, the thing is, when you're doing the wing over and over and over again, and you've experienced the conversation once, there's not going to be really anything different. And I totally get it. It is frustrating. I even noted on our original raid stream that this was going to be a bit of a frustration because there's a lot of dialogue. But the truth is that with this wing, the devs did add dialogue options that stops the random chatter between the various NPCs and gets you to the next environment quite quickly. This wing also has a lot of RNG and the kind of stuff you can experience each time, especially in that middle bit where you're going through the labyrinth rooms. So, I don't know. I find it amazing, though, that right here on, like, week 1 or 2, people were immediately saying, oh, it's too much dialogue. I want to go from encounter to encounter. You'd think it would take a month or so for that to trigger people, but there you go. Anthony responds and says, we do enable a couple of cutscene skips via conversation. The introduction scene with Zomoros and Glenna is skippable. The sorting and appraisal scene with Zomoros and Kadim is also skippable. That said, there are indeed a few areas that are still gated by dialogue, as you pointed out, after Boss 1 and also the scenes before and after the Lagos. Due to the way we implemented our content, and because we added the skips towards the end of development, we only aim to address the longest scenes. The skips require some restructuring of our content setup, up. For example, in the worst case, there could be multiple Zomoroses speaking multiple lines at once. There's certainly a possibility to add more skips for the other scenes, and at the very least, we may look to make it so that the Jackal portals aren't dependent on Zomoros finishing his lines. Yeah, maybe they'll do some changes. I don't know whether it will be anything substantial for this wing, but this is the really crazy line. Going forward, our goal is definitely to create narrative content in such a way that is not as intrusive. So hopefully that doesn't mean they'll cut back on the intrigue and story. I think the devs really settled on something very good here with this release, and that's the lore books. Most of the really interesting exposition and world building we get is from those lore books, just littered around the wing here. So maybe they'll lean more heavily on that next time, but I do like the dialogue too, at least for that first playthrough. They'll just have to be careful and make sure it's as skippable as possible. It's funny to see this comment chain here on this AFC, because really, I thought it was very cool how much was skippable in this wing. I guess that I hadn't really thought about the first encounter and the reducing of the wall in front of the first Jackal portal too much. Alright, so next question is about fractals. Bit of lore heavy stuff. How come you didn't make a nod to fractals when our player character finds the missed anomalies in the story? And needless to say, guys, there'll be big spoilers about all aspects of the story in this video. Especially the Orion one, in concept and execution, is awfully similar to how fractals work. I'd honestly love to see that explored, and even see the first on-Tyria fractal. Although that seems very unlikely. Yeah, so anyone will have made this comparison that when you look at something that's constantly looping and repeating himself, it's like a fractal has just been dumped into Tyria. Well, Connor Fallon here says, it's kind of funny you say this, because I always thought of the Orion bubble in Jahai as a displaced fractal. Just because it isn't a fractal that exists in the Sanctuary does not mean it is not a fractal, as it is our defined in lore, a trapped echo of time in the mists. In early design, we actually talked about it being the searing of Ascalon, which is a fractal, but going to interact with ore felt more distinct and more novel, so we decided to go in that direction in the end. I think this is really cool, and what I really want to see, Connor and the writing team, is one of our in-game allies actually refer to them as fractals, even though they're not a party to what Dessa's doing and the research there and the Sanctuary. Because if they do that, I think that will actually really help to solidify in the player base's mind how these are a consistent phenomenon. It's a really bloody cool idea. And also, as well, that behind the scenes that they were going to do the searing. So what does this mean? That searing fractal wholesale might have been dumped into Jahai. Like, we see the Great Northern Wall there, and we get to attack it in a similar way, and there's the same number of NPCs until we have a big boss fight in a courtyard. Literally the same thing. You guys might think that's lazy, but I think that would have been amazing. Also quite a large aspect of the map too, because that fractal's quite a big one. But ultimately, I do agree with this ore idea. Going with ore was brilliant, and there'll be more comments about that in the AFC coming up. Next, we have someone else complimented something in Jahai. The weather system in Jahai is one of the most well-designed pieces of content in the game, says Nebelim. The brand rain, the complete change of ambience when you enter the time bubbles or when a rift opens, the tornado that sweeps by, amaze me in ways I've never felt before. And then they go on to say a lot of other lovely compliments, ending with, thank you for the amazing attention to detail. It really makes a difference. It reminds me greatly of Nightfall in Alona, and how we even seem to be going to the mist towards the disaster, the same fashion we've delved into the realm of torment before. Yeah, and they've made a really interesting comparison at the end there. If you played Guild Wars 1 Nightfall, you'll remember that as Abaddon was merging these realms, various areas of the regular Elonan territory started to become Nightfallen. Like the Garden of Saborin became the Nightfallen Garden as another realm of reality just chunked itself in and replaced it. When you go to the realm of torment, you see that what Abaddon is building there is like blueprints for what he will eventually just dump Tyria side. It's very similar to the same similar thing going on. And in the same area of the world? Well, Kirk Wilford responds here, and he says, I'm glad you like it. Our whole team had several meetings early in Episode 4's development to figure out ways to help Jahai Bluffs feel dangerous, but not in a way that discouraged players from participating in activities around the map when they were active. I think all of the hazards on the map do a great job in changing the way you go about reaching that vista or completing that event while still being fun to deal with. I'm a huge fan of weather systems in games, so to be able to work along with the rest of the team to get the storms, tornadoes, and other hazards in was a joy. It's been mentioned before, but one of the key moments in the development of the episode was when we were testing a bounty and it started raining. Then the tornado was approaching. It became a race against the clock as we all tried to finish the bounty off before the tornado swung by, and when we realized how positive the interaction felt, we knew that it was something worth keeping. Yeah, you often hear this from developers, right, where they'll talk about they're testing something out and two separate systems suddenly interact with one another and it just works really well. And that just solidifies it in their mind. I personally haven't had a bouncy experience like that, but I did have my first ever tornado overlap with an escort event, sending our entire Zerg into the air, which was, once again, a really cool moment. I like these dynamic weather things. I want to see ArenaNet keep going with it. And in terms of just regular weather, like, oh, it's raining, I really want them to just sort out the audio and change the way it looks a bit so it's a bit more prominent, because it's always so quiet and in the background with Guild Wars, the way that they work the audio. And then we could have really good storms in this game. It's nice to see the back-end tech is there for it. Next, we have a very simple question with a very simple answer. Favorite story part of the episode from Arden. My personal favorite is in the Aurene vision. The art, the music, the sound effects, the whole created a masterpiece. Can you tell me who composed the music that plays during this vision? So, I can't help but realize, if this thread was on Reddit as a celebration, there would be a lot of devs responding here, talking about their favorite part of the episode and so on. But over on the AFC, we just get one response. And good job to him. Matthew Medina here gives a good one about the music. And then that's it, sadly. He says, our main composer is McLean Deemer. But we also have Lena Chappelle helping out. And both of them have been creating all the awesome music for our Living World episodes. So yeah, if you guys have been following the ArenaNet streams, you'll know that Lena did return. I was complimenting some of the raid music this release. I'm thinking of changing up the music on the videos because it's getting a bit samey at the moment and they've got so much new stuff to pick from, right? I was complimenting some of the raid music that I think actually Lena did in the end, and I said it was McLean. But so yeah, the two of them are working, but I guess a lot you find in the regular areas of the patch was him. Next question. What about divided one's episode content into several updates? No matter how much content you launched, we will clear out all the achievement and collection as soon as possible. What about divided the content into several parts for ongoing updates and we'll be motivated to play the game? So, yeah, this is a weird comment from the community. Basically saying, why not trickle stuff out really slowly so that people look back more than once every 3 months? They're even within that, you know, Living World release, constantly looking back because new things might be unlocking and enabling. Essentially asking them to go back to a Living World Season 1 style thing, to be honest. But almost a little bit weirder than that because they're asking for content to be held off. Matthew Medina comes in with a response saying, spreading content releases thinner also results in us having to spread our time and resources across a larger window, effectively meaning that there's never a time when we're not in shipping mode, which would be prohibitively distracting to the developers and especially punishing to our QA team. We have settled into a cadence now that is sustainable over the long term, and changing that to trickle content out over weeks would guarantee that we'd burn the teams out quickly. I love how assured he is about this because, come on, the studio's been through this. Look, you may not, as a fan, have followed the development of this for the entire time, and that's perfectly reasonable. Look, we've been in this world, and they were very clear about what it did to them. I think the format and the way that they release content right now is very precisely and deliberately structured as it is, and we're not going to be able to wantonly request and change their minds in an AFC on that. But yeah, so there you go. Next, we have what keeps you going, motivated to create and release new content like this every few months, says Cinder2509. I can imagine it must be tremendous work every time and a lot of work working it all out together. As a content creator myself, I know that there can be ups and downs, and sometimes, and I just wanted to know how that all works out at ArenaNet, and if there are downs, how everyone gets up again. Thanks for all your work and dedication. I've enjoyed the episode so far. Interesting question, really. Asking the devs to be blunt about burnout and motivation levels in their jobs and stuff, where their bosses may be reading, I mean, it's kind of weird. So anyway, we do get a response from Eric, who says, oh boy, that's a heck of a question. And it's a weird question as well, in that it's almost like some admission that the work is hell, so how do you keep going? I don't know. maybe I'm a bit too cynical about that. So, the longer version, I suspect, is a combination of a lot of factors. Among them, sure, are mundane considerations. I, for one, am a big fan of being employed, and I'd be lying if I said there are no days when this job feels like a job. Cold, drizzly Mondays in February, I'm looking at you. But that's true of anything worth doing. As you said, there are going to be ups and downs. The key is the transitions from the latter to the former. Again, just like you said, and that's where teammates come in. This is going to sound an awful lot like company line hogwash, but I mean it. My crew is awesome. I've worked out on enough solo projects to know that momentum is the currency of the realm when developing pretty much anything. So surrounding oneself with colleagues who are similarly all out of bubblegum is the best way to keep a long-term undertaking moving forward. And by that score, I'm super lucky. I wouldn't say there's a flow of cool ideas and prototypes that circles the desk in my pod at work. It's more like a storm. Sometimes fitful, occasionally destructive, often impressive, and always entertaining to count the seconds between when a spark strikes and somebody jumps into our content editor and starts bringing the thunder. How about that? Totally stuck the metaphor landing. In the spirit of Too Long Didn't Read, perhaps the shorter version about what motivates us could fit into 4 simple words. Oh, hey, what if? And then like a winky face. Sounds pretty good. So, I definitely get this idea that there's a lot of inertia to when you're trying to bring a project to fruition. And that idea, you need that momentum to keep rolling, otherwise things can fizzle up quite quickly. I'm very familiar with too. Anyway, moving on. We've got Living World team names from Ellerith, who says, hey, this is completely trivial, but would it be too much trouble for the Living Story teams to come up with their own names? I actually love this question. Calling the 3 teams by what they worked on, the Daybreak, Jahai team, Bug in the System, Draconis Mons team, or by number, Team 1, Team 2, Team 3, feels alienating, and I would rather call them by something that shows their personality as a team. So, we do get some responses here. I think this would be great, but maybe they want to keep it a bit anonymized to some extent so that people aren't too judgmental or whatever. And I'm sure that there's some flow of employees. Here's the dev's response. First from Heather, who says, we did this with Season 3. My team, which was working on all of the White Mantle content at the time, tried to push for Team Dismantle, but ultimately none of us could agree on good names that we wanted to keep forever. Likewise, we much prefer to think of ourselves as one team, even though we're made up of a subset of smaller ones. Like Kronos mentioned, the designers often help each other out, and we do have a lot of shared team members that work with every team, like the prop artists, the animators, the visual effects artists, live leads, and some of the writers. So if you guys don't get that idea, Team Dismantle, way back in the day, when the devs expanded on Crichton politics and the Messiah influence over the region with the Guild Wars Beyond updates, the Crichton Civil War, they kind of set up this idea that there was to dismantle, which was propaganda spread by the citizens of Crichton and the Shining Blade, and the contrary propaganda were posters thrown up by the White Mantle saying to obey, and that's basically what they're referencing with their team name there. The other response from Connor Fallon, who says, it's worth noting also that the composition of those groups shifts and people get moved from team to team not infrequently. While there is a lot of overlap, it's not exactly accurate to say that the Bloodstone Fen and Jahai Bluffs were made by the same people. I think the only way through this really for the devs would be to basically have like a team lead for each of the 3, and the team is named after that, like they're the shepherd of the whole group, and then the minutiae of which employees are actually there at any time and who contributes can change, but there's still like that one beacon bedrock touchstone person that's in each team, but I don't know whether they even have that. Anyway, weird topic. Moving on, for fun, if Guild Wars 2 characters were in WWE, what entrance music would you give to various characters? In other words, are there songs that remind you of various Guild Wars 2 characters? This seems like a kind of fluffy post you'd just put on Reddit to the community, but no, this is directed to the devs, and Matthew comes and he says, oh man, as a diehard WCW, WWE, ECW fan growing up, this topic is right up my alley. These would be my themes for Dragon's Watch. And so here he lists them all out. I won't read them all there. You guys can pause it if you'd like to check it. But yeah, kind of cool that he's actually just immediately got on tap and answer to that question. And yeah, so Displaced Towers. It's also cool seeing he fully 100% embraces Ritlock as a member of that group there. Next, we've got Displaced Towers in Jahai Bluffs coming back. So we're talking about the Orion thing again. To start off, I'd like to mention how much I love the detail all of this. I've been hoping to see some idea of what all looked like pre-Cataclysm Dragon Rising for years. I don't know why this person in the OP of this thread is that enthusiastic about what we saw. It's not like we really got a great look at what all looked like pre-Cataclysm. Come on, man. Anyway, as for what I'd like to inquire, how much went into the process of making this Shard of Ore? Is the Vizier's Tower the same model we see in the Straits of Devastation, but updated? Were there other spots in ore considered for the scene? That's a great question. Then lastly, if it's not too spoilery of a question, is there any chance we'll get to know more about pre-Cataclysm Dragon Rising ore in the future? Props for all the awesome little details in this episode. It made it a ton of fun. So Connor comes and says, really glad you enjoyed them. This area went through a lot of iteration, both artistically and design-wise. I don't think Justin Fawcett, our main map artist, is participating in this forum chat, so I'll answer as best I can for both, and maybe he can chime in later. Art-wise, of course, most of ore is made out of modified assets from the sunken version, cleaned up by a prop artist to remove cracks, barnacles, and the like. There are some assets from elsewhere that match the style well enough, mixed in to create more variety. Justin did a fantastic job with the Vizier's Tower. It certainly looks like an intact version of the original. It's worth noting in both cases, the tower is made out of multiple pieces, so there wasn't really a model to be the same as though. As for gameplay, originally there was less of a time loop and more of a never-ending battle. You talked to fallen soldiers on the sides of it, and they responded differently based on your race. It was neat, but not as interesting mechanically, and it could be potentially misinterpreted as being the actual battle and not an echo, which seemed dangerous. So we settled on the time loop approach instead. I have an affinity for time loops, so it was pretty fun to implement one inside Guild Wars 2. So yeah, we even hear that they had, so what, it was going to be the faux fire, then it was going to be ore, then it was going to be talking to people a lot. I like the idea that we could have got a bit more dialogue out of it, but at the end of the day, there was a reasonable amount there. They did that whole thing with the poem, they did the extra hidden jumping puzzle thing, they did the tablet, and if you just watch the troops, the Imperator Ventus actually does speak a bit, and the Orions there speak a bit, out loud, voice acted. We even get an interesting revelation there, guys. I don't know if this went over your head, but that the Vizier was not acting entirely as a rogue agent in unleashing the power of the scrolls. He had people defending him at his tower, knowing full well what he was about to do. And I think that that does continue to layer him and make him less of a cartoony villain, because if he's not completely mad just following Abaddon, acting all on his own. There are other people there that agreed with what he was doing. It makes him seem a little bit less crazy. Anyway, so open world story NPCs is the next question from Perilist. Having Blish follow us around in the open world was neat. I know it's not the first client-side NPC, but is this the first case of having one following the player around and react to the world? I'm curious to see what ArenaNet can do with this technology in the future. Me too. This is very, very exciting. I love to see what they did there. In the past, we have had client-side only NPCs. They use it a lot now, but they're always like static and completely invisible for people who aren't on the equivalent story step and at the right time. Well, Blish is following us fully, and so they explain a bit of how this works. Matthew first says, to my knowledge, yes, this was the first use of an open world story follower like this. There was a fair amount of experimentation needed to get this to work, but we were really happy with the end result. There's definitely limitations for the tech. Blish can't fight with you, for example, but I imagine that it's something we're going to return to when appropriate. Eric says, yup, this is actually a new tech we developed for this episode. You can hear more about it here. Now, that's the post about the prairie dog on Reddit. In the past, we've created certain NPCs to certain clients based on things like quest progression, but those NPCs are still run by the server, which means they have to stand still, which can be awkward for some story situations. Wait, why don't you just come with me? And irritating for some gameplay beats. So I have to go all the way back there to talk to so-and-so? And as such, we wanted to see if we could address this problem without introducing new risks. And we thought Blish was a good opportunity to try some trickery. She's on the other foot now, Smipe, as this time you're the test subject. And I agree, we built this tech with the intention of using it for more than just one, admittedly awfully lovable golem-bodied buddy. I can't say for sure when or even if it will get used in future content, since context will determine whether it's really the best tool for the job. So I guess I'm just going to say stay tuned and see what happens. I'm interested in, especially if they get combat stuff going. I don't know, if you think about the Tower of Nightmares and the hallucinations and the toxins, if my amazing Season 5 is Season 1 theory comes to pass, you could see they use this Bish technology while making people hallucinate in the Tower of Nightmares with some kind of re-implementation of that, or indeed even going further forwards in some kind of fractals or raiding content. They could do similar stuff too. Could be really fun. Hell, in POF, the boggers, if I remember rightly, cause you to hallucinate weird little spider things, and maybe they could update that kind of thing there. Moving on, we got MOX in Sun's Refuge. An interesting question on a different forum. Unfortunately, didn't receive an answer, so I'd like to ask it here again. Are there any chances to see MOX replace the music bot in the Sun's Refuge? It would add a little bit of flavor and would fit the character's history. Did this idea ever come up during the development process? And if yes, why was it discarded? Yeah, so MOX, obviously the Dervish Golem, reasonably associated with Nightfall stuff. At least one of his Golem brothers was rampaging at the Boca Amphitheater that we had to deal with. And yeah, it might have been kind of nice. My suspicion was that it was because they couldn't guarantee if you'd done Draconis Mons as well, and I wasn't sure how intelligent the Sun's Refuge was in seeing all former content and what you've unlocked. Matthew Medina's answer is very simple. He says you can blame Bram for it. He would have taken issue with us inviting more spiders into the Sun's Refuge. Where MOX goes, so does Webby, presumably. So yeah, they've introduced this idea that Bram is scared of spiders, and I guess that that's a good enough answer for them. It's obviously not the real answer. The real answer must be that they just didn't consider it, I guess, then. But it's a good retroactive story justification, so hey, I'll buy it. Revisiting story mission challenge moats like hearts and minds. This is from Agent Noun, who says, every time you release a new Living World episode, I'm struck by how much effort and attention goes into making really cool solo instances. You all do really, really good work there, and some of them taking place in unique maps that we'll never really go back to unless we're interested in achievements. Have you ever considered revisiting the idea of having challenge modes for certain story instances, like Hearts of Minds was back in Heart of Thorns? I can envision some of these turning into great 5-player group content, possibly with some sort of weekly reward to encourage players to repeat them. So, this is a cool idea. It's very close to the CM repeatable discussion with raids. It kind of flirts with some other discussions. You guys may not remember at this point, but back in Season 2, the devs had story instances designed that the first time you beat them, you couldn't get any achievements. And once you beat it, you unlocked the ability to replay, and now achievements were available, and it was kind of an extra motivation. And in my opinion, that is still a very good, very pure, decent idea for how they should have been handling stories going forwards. However, the community rebelled against it. They didn't like that they had to play the content twice, because I guess Guild Wars 2 is just that painful. And so the devs stopped doing it. They decided that you could get all the achievements on your first time through instead. And I've always taken issue with that. I don't like having to faff about and fiddle around with achievements and worry that if I don't play perfectly on my first time through, it really dilutes the experience, distracts me from the story. And just in terms of retention, I think their original idea was better. The problem wasn't locking off achievement progress until the repeat. The problem was making achievements things people would have accidentally got the first time through, so it feels like an unnecessary punishment to make you do it twice. Essentially, it was the achievements themselves that were poorly designed and needed to be further off the beaten path and needed to be more tricky to do that would have enabled that entire format. Now, what this person here is asking is for those kinds of achievements, but really difficult ones that require 5 players. And I like that idea too. I like what they were going for with the final instance of Heart of Thorns, with the Nightmare Mode, as I remember it was actually called, bugs and stuff aside. So what's a contemporary response from the devs on all of this? Because obviously they seem to have just settled into their new format and have moved, and you know, that doesn't tick anyone off, but nonetheless is much more boring. And well, here's what Matthew says: implementing challenge modes are, well, a challenge. Sorry, but in all seriousness, while they do add some amount of replayability and additional difficulty, it does turn a single encounter into multiples, because we would have to balance it for each difficulty level. While it's not automatically out of scope, for a Living World episode, it can be difficult enough to balance the encounters we have without multiplying them in this way, unless that is desired by the designer up front and can be appropriately budgeted for. Having said that, I do appreciate hearing that some players really like harder content options in the game's story. So hopefully in the absence of challenge modes, there's enough to test yourself against in content like fractals and raids to scratch their itch. And I think that's basically, Matthew's hit the nail on the head there. If you want compelling group content, you don't get it in Living Worlds or in the story. I know that's where the majority of the game's budget seems to go now, but that's not where you get it. If you want good group content, You go to fractals, you go to raids, you go to PvP, and to a lesser extent, you go to world versus world. That's really the areas that the game's hoping to satisfy. And it is disappointing, but even way back at core, you'll see that the devs have never found a good way to properly scale difficulty when more players arrive. And I think we're lucky to get as much as we do. And that's from someone, by the way, who plays all Living World co-op first time through and sees how much it gets trivialized with just 2 people, let alone 5. So, yeah, I think it's just a lot of work for them. Anyway, it's a really interesting topic. I'm glad to see people talking about it. Next, we have a question. What is Timey's illness anyway? So, big spoilers here. More bosses similar to the Deadeye boss. So, 2 different questions. First, Ori says, I missed Living World Season 1. So I don't know if this was addressed there, but up until this episode, I always thought that Timey's illness was non-fatal, just something that limited her mobility quite severely and made her frail in general. And in fact, up till now, it seemed like she was actually getting better. But then we are blindsided by the fact that her illness is fatal. I'd just like to know what exactly it is, unless you can't say because it's undecided, a spoiler for upcoming content, then it's fine, but I'd like to know which one if possible. Now, that first question doesn't actually get a response at all. I will highlight it here on my recap video because I think, once again, it is showing something that is crippling the game right now. The origin stories of all of the main characters, our big connections to them, are devoid. They're missing from the game. Even people who did play Living World Season 1 did it so many years ago that the odds they remember those very fleeting little instances where Timey was talking about her disease, you know, nobody's really clear on this anymore. I have amazing respect for the devs treating the game as though Season 1 is all fresh on our minds and is still in it, because at the day they finally re-implement it, they will have that cohesive whole. I have a lot of respect for them and the way that they handled the Timey story here. But, you know, it's once again just demonstrating players need this story re-implemented. They need it shown off there. They don't get an answer from the devs whatsoever. The second question is about the Deadeye boss. The fight was extremely well done, but it reminded me just how much shit I hate thieves in general, so I really hated it. Anyway, I thought it was cool that we got a boss in game that used a playable profession weapon skills and a stronger profession skill to go along with it. That was amazing. Is it possible to get more bosses like this in the future for other classes? I think what the OP here is missing is devs do actually do this quite a lot. So the response here is from Connor, who quotes the OP and says, I'm very conflicted about this statement. I can't say for certain whether we will design more bosses like this, but the feedback that you enjoyed it is definitely appreciated. There are definitely a lot of player skills that, expanded, could make interesting challenges. The Deadeye sniper ability seemed like one that was especially suited for an extended showdown, which was one of the reasons we chose that for Zavira's class. That said, I'll note there is a subset of players that is quite vocal about disliking bosses that have stronger versions of their own skills, or skills they don't have. So it's something we have to think about every time we design an encounter. That last comment there from Connor makes me want to vomit. Really? What? What? The people are so... I mean, I don't know how petty or weird or insular that is of an opinion from a community member. I don't want to fight any boss that is stronger than me, that uses skills like mine but better. Like, what? Oh, that is not feedback you should listen to at all. Please. It's a good boss fight. I want to see more like it. Moving on. Event requirement for point of... interest access revisited. This is also a comment from the community that I don't really agree with much, but I'll give them their fair due. They say, I asked this last time, never got a response, so I'll try again. While I have enjoyed exploring recent maps, I'm a Guild Wars 1 vet, I noticed a rather annoying trend. One point of interest in each map is getting locked behind events, completely preventing people from getting map completion if they happen to be around when that event is not up. Examples include blah, 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 blah. I do not believe it is logical to punish a player by making them wait for an event to finish a map because they weren't at the right place, the right time. Furthermore, blah, blah, blah. Basically, the comment is, I don't want to play very much of the game, and I don't want to indulge in the events, which is content nonetheless. I just want map completion instantly. Will you bow to me, please? And the response from Connor is, so I don't think there was ever a conversation about doing this deliberately to keep people on the map. We have more interesting ways to do that. I think it's more an issue of when there are locked off areas of the map, what's inside of these locked off areas is often interesting or notable in some way. So it often makes sense to make it a POI. But the feedback is good to have. I know at least will keep this in mind in the future. And Matthew Medina as well follows up saying, in the next regular release, this POI should be able to be unlocked from the open world by walking up to the gate to the courtyard, the one that you exited from at the start of a Shattered Nation story instance. So this is Guild Wars 2 in a nutshell. They will do it. They will enable you to play for just 5 minutes and they'll log out. And if you feel like you're being asked to play too much, just say it on the forums and they'll patch it for you. So there you go. Next, we get creating the Awakened and the loss of Joko. This is a really important question, especially in the context of this patch and Joko's, defeats. Arielana says, I'm not sure if this is covered in the lore, but how exactly were the Awakened created? What I mean by this is, what role did Joko have in the process? Now that he's gone, does that mean that more Awakened cannot be created? What happens to those that are already awakened? It's a good question, because while Joko was absent in the core Path of Fire story, we did see awakenings still occur. Connor says, all of the Awakened up until this point were created by Joko himself, or by channeling Joko's abilities. No one knows how to make more now that he's dead. That said, those who are already awakened seem to be sticking around, so he clearly isn't required for their basic existence. Historically, we've seen some lower level awakened in Vabi collapse during his absence, but we've also seen others who stuck around for hundreds of years even when he wasn't around. We don't have any data for what happens when he is gone. It's possible they will last forever. It's possible they will all fall apart after some time, or it could vary based on rank or self-care. It's really too early to know. Either way, if they're killed in combat or in an accident without anyone knowing how to reawaken them, then that will be it, which is why we see so many struggling with the idea of mortality in episode 4. I love this response from Connor because, and I might be wrong, but it seems to be demonstrating an understanding of even the Guild Wars 1 situation. Joko was imprisoned for like 200 years, and in his absence, the Awakened were still doing things. They were wandering around, they were thinking for themselves, forming their own fractured, splintered little sects and cells and societies that Joko then had the task of reunifying once he found freedom. Will a similar thing happen now that he's dead too? Well, that's kind of one of the big things about the opening of the patch, right? Love the Heart of Thorns masteries in the Jahai Bluffs. I loved being able to utilize my masteries more in this release. I know it's been limited in the past because they thematically didn't necessarily fit into the desert. I would love to see more in the future, and you will take advantage of reality unraveling to give the PC a device akin to the Rift Stabilizer that will let us detect instabilities where something is close to pushing through and temporarily pull it into our reality, kind of like Bioshock Infinite. Even if we solve the whole Kraukatoric issue, you could say the weak points are a part of the fallout from him gaining that much power. Blah, blah, blah. Heather Connor simply says, we were excited to bring back the Heart of Thorns masteries in a way that fit well into the desert. I absolutely love ley lines and updrafts, so it was a blast to be able to add them here. I wish she talked just a little bit more, man. Come on, this is so important. It's such a good part of the patch. Oh, give me more. Lots more. The best of those masteries isn't even to do with the rifts. It's just the fact that out on the fields you find like an adrenal mushroom and stuff. That's where it was truly magical. Anyway, Bram and spiders. Good question here, really. Telectric says, I remember in Season 3, Episode 3, we went through that cave to get Asgeir's scroll for Bram that would help him pierce Jormag's tooth. There was literally a section where we had to kill spiders, and Bram did not seem to care at all. So what made Bram so suddenly afraid of spiders? Now, just before I give you the developer response here, guys, I will just say, for me, I had a really weird moment psychologically. You know, they say how you can't trust your memories and that people are so fallible, right, in recollection of things. When I played this patch and I was in the dark cave with Bram and he was scared of the spiders, I smiled and even said out loud, wow, this is really cool, because remember, we fought those spiders in the previous cave and he didn't like that either. I somehow remembered that there were spiders in the ice cave, but like completely invented this feeling that Bram was scared of them in the past. But that's not true. He was completely fine in the past. So I like credited the patch on my first experience of it for something that I really shouldn't have. Anyway, Connor comes in with this response and doesn't talk about the fact that they basically just fabricated this aspect of his character. And the justification that they can find is that Rox calms him down. You could say Rox was his rock. Rox really rocks. I'll also note that A, they were stuck with these creatures in this cave-in, and B, these ones were picking them up and carrying about. That's the sort of thing that turns fear into panic, and once you're panicked, everything that follows is heightened. So, I mean, I would appreciate a bit of candor that, hey, we hadn't thought about his arachnophobia back then, but I suppose it's justifiable that he wouldn't have freaked out so much in the past. Next, we have this question. The meta event in Jahai Bluffs is excellent. Can we expect more content like this in the future? Specifically, the meta event revolving around fighting the death-branded Shatter. This is a really cool event. One thing that made me really happy was the rare cosmetic reward you added as a possible drop. This is something I see people getting quite excited by, and already you will not fail to find people flocking to this event. Is it easy to create infusions as rewards? What might make you hesitate to add too many ultra-rare rewards? Brilliant question and very incisive. It's asking the really important things. Can we get this every map? Because it's such a great format. Give us a world boss with something like a Chak egg sack on it, right? Which is what we got here, and everybody's super hyped for the Death Branded Chatterer. It works, and I think they could have been doing this a long time ago. The event itself doesn't have to be some wildly complicated map sprawling thing. It just triggers every now and then, and it's like a new worthwhile world boss people will go to. So, yeah, what did the devs say? Well, Heather here, we're really happy you enjoyed the meta and the chase item. Is that what they call them? Chase items? I can't speak for what we're doing in the future. You'll have to stay tuned. But hearing positive feedback, it's great and definitely something we'll keep in mind for the future. Well, it is great, and I hope to see more too. If every single map this season, and even the POF, like, think about the POF core maps. That's something that even they're missing. If there was a big boss on the Desert Highland that dropped something super rare, people would be doing that meta, and you wouldn't have such a distinct feeling of abandonment on those maps. You know, we've got the Choya event with the Choya Pinata and the confetti thing there for Amnoon, so that's nice, and that got people doing the casino meta a lot. But everywhere else, it's just been devoid, right? So I like this format. The sniper treatment. I am curious as to what ArenaNet's stance is on law and justice. The sniper took out several pact members in cold blood. Surely, just because of a vision in which she might appear useful, she's suddenly exempt of law or justice. Why, after we beat her, taking her captive, or at least disarming her, was that not the first course of action? This lass just killed some of your friends, but she wants to fight with us now, so be sure to let her feel welcome. Okay. You know, I hadn't thought of this, but yeah, it's pretty weak. Connor says, to be honest, I never intended for those pact people to be dead so much as downed, passed out from the gas, but I disabled the ability to res them because players would stop and try and revive them and fall to the poisons themselves. She was gonna try and stop anyone who tried to take the sword. She was desperate to accomplish her mission, but yeah, more intense than I intended. In general though, with questions like this, it's good to remember that every company is composed of a lot of individuals with all sorts of different opinions. I'm not sure I really buy that last line. They have to be consistent in their delivery of the story on the way out, right? They have to come to some consensus as what is actually okay. I like I can see how this accidentally happened, and I like the idea that they're just unconscious. Makes me wonder if there is missing something in Guild Wars to differentiate between defeated, downstate, and dead in a more definitive way, especially for story. Because that is quite important. You know, defeated but not resable should be different to dead. But there you go. All right, so, yeah, there you go. And I guess that's the last one. Wow, already. I didn't realize that was the last question. So there you go. That's the AFC. Like I said, a bit shorter and not so many juicy nuggets here. I wonder if the devs will go back to Reddit next time, because I feel like there is a little bit more traffic, both from the community and from the developers too. I think they are, as human beings, probably more likely to go to Reddit, it looks, and respond over there and see their responses get traction than buried out here on the forums. I don't know. Anyway, you guys can let me know what you think about my responses, about any of the community questions and whatnot. Keep an eye on it as well, but I'll fill you in on any later anecdotes that might come up. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you for some more starter guides stuff later. It's also very likely that if you're watching this video, you can also head to Boots' channel, where you often see I do balance videos with him. I'm over there on a new series where he's showing off some adventures. Some of the footage today has been that mushroom cave. He's #1 all time on that right now, and might be kind of fun to see him teach us how to get gold and go beyond. So if you guys want more to watch, definitely check that out, and I'll see you all very soon.